The scent of fear has its own language. It speaks in cold sweat, in quickened heartbeats, in the subtle tremor of hands that wish to appear steady. Malcolm Thorne had mastered the art of concealing his fear during the 10 years he had lived among the wolves of the northern realm. But tonight, as he stood frozen among the scattered herbs he had been sorting in the castle's communal kitchen, he knew that the wolves around him could smell his terror as clearly as he could smell the rosemary in his hands. "The Alpha King wants to see you." 7 words spoken by Thor Ironwolf, the king's third commander. 7 simple words that shattered the careful invisibility Malcolm had cultivated for a decade. 7 words that sent ice through his veins and turned the warm, bustling kitchen into a vacuum of silence. Thor stood impassively at the kitchen entrance, his massive frame blocking the only exit. His weathered face betrayed nothing, but his gray eyes flickered with something that might have been pity. Around him, the kitchen staff, mostly humans with a few lower-ranking wolves, had gone still. Dozens of eyes turned toward Malcolm, the quiet, efficient man who arrived before dawn and left after dusk. The man with the strange silver pendant who spoke only when necessary. The man who had survived among wolves longer than any other human in the castle. Why? Malcolm managed to keep his voice level, his calloused fingers instinctively finding the silver crescent that hung around his neck. His father's last gift before vanishing during the Great War. "Always stand your ground, even when outmatched," his father had told him. The pendant had become his talisman, his silent confidant in a world that had shown him little mercy. Thor's jaw tightened. "It is not my place to question the Alpha King's commands, and it is certainly not yours." The kitchen remained unnaturally quiet. No one moved to help Malcolm, to defend him, to question why the most powerful wolf in the Northern Territories would summon a lowly kitchen worker. But he saw the speculation in their eyes, the relief that it was not them being summoned to what could only be an interrogation, or worse. "Now," Thor added, his deep voice softening almost imperceptibly, "do not make this harder than it needs to be." Malcolm set down the basket of dried rosemary with steady hands, refusing to allow the trembling in his core to reach his extremities. He wiped his palms on his simple gray tunic, a garment chosen precisely because it would help him blend into the background, become invisible among the vibrant, vital wolves whose world he inhabited but could never join. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked, the question genuine despite knowing how childish it sounded. A bitter laugh came from Mara, the head cook, who had never bothered to hide her disdain. "Oh, you've done something all right. Humans always do." Malcolm flinched at her words, at the venom they contained. 10 years he had worked in this kitchen, arriving first and leaving last, taking the tasks no one else wanted, sleeping in the smallest quarters, eating the plainest food. 10 years of existing in the shadows, grateful just to be allowed to live when so many humans had perished in the Great War between wolves, vampires, and mankind. And now, summoned by King Alaric himself, the most feared wolf in the Northern Territories, perhaps in all the remaining free lands. A leader who had won his throne through blood and ruthlessness, a king who was said to have executed his own uncle for treachery without blinking an eye. What could he possibly want with Malcolm? Thor gestured impatiently toward the door. "The Alpha King does not like to be kept waiting." Malcolm swallowed hard and followed the commander out of the kitchen, acutely aware of the whispers that erupted behind them. The corridor stretched before him, longer than he remembered, its stone walls seeming to close in with each step. Guards fell into formation around them, 4 of them, massive and stone-faced, their ceremonial armor gleaming under the torchlight. Far more security than needed for one frightened human. "Thor," he ventured, his voice small in the cavernous hallway, "please tell me what this is about. I have done nothing to draw attention to myself." Thor kept walking, his stride purposeful. "Perhaps that is the problem," he said enigmatically, not bothering to look back. They ascended the grand staircase that led to the upper levels of the castle, areas Malcolm had never been permitted to enter. Each floor they passed grew more opulent, more intimidating. Tapestries depicting ancient wolf battles adorned walls inlaid with precious metals. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. The scent of power permeated everything, old power, earned through centuries of dominance and victory. His heart hammered against his ribs, each beat a desperate plea. Don't notice me. Don't see me. Let me return to my safe insignificance. But it was too late. Whatever anonymity he had cultivated had already been stripped away with those 7 devastating words. They reached an ornate double door guarded by wolves whose very stillness spoke of lethal capability. They acknowledged Thor with subtle nods, their eyes sweeping over Malcolm with cold assessment. One of them smirked, and Malcolm heard him inhale deeply, no doubt smelling the fear radiating from him. A human in the throne room, he muttered to his companion. This should be interesting. The doors swung open, and Malcolm was nudged forward, not roughly, but with unmistakable command. The throne room stretched before him, vast and imposing, its high windows casting long rectangles of fading afternoon light across the polished marble floor. Wolves of high rank lined the walls, adorned in finery that marked their status within the pack hierarchy. And there, at the end of the impossibly long walkway, sat the Alpha King. Even from a distance, there was no mistaking his presence. King Alaric occupied the ancient throne hewn from a single massive oak as if born to it, though everyone knew he had claimed it through conquest just 5 years ago. His shoulders were broad, his posture perfect, his face unreadable beneath a closely trimmed dark beard. He wore no crown. Alpha Kings never did. Their power came not from symbols, but from something more primal, more absolute. "Move," Thor whispered, giving Malcolm a gentle push. His legs felt leaden as he began the long walk toward the throne. The guards flanked him, their footfalls synchronized, creating a rhythmic backdrop to his racing thoughts. Every eye in the room tracked his progress. He could feel their curiosity, their judgment, their speculation. What had he done to deserve this? Had someone accused him of theft, of spying, of some transgression he couldn't even imagine? Malcolm kept his eyes downcast, focusing on placing one foot in front of the other. The marble floor reflected his figure, making him appear even more diminutive than he was in his simple gray tunic. His dark hair pulled back in a practical tie, his unadorned face. Everything about him seemed designed for insignificance, for surviving by being overlooked. "Halt!" commanded a voice when they were still several paces from the throne. Malcolm froze, his eyes still fixed on the floor. "Look at me, human." The Alpha King's voice was not what Malcolm had expected. Not a roar, not a growl, but something smooth and controlled, like the surface of a deep lake that concealed unfathomable depths, dangerous in its very restraint. Malcolm raised his gaze slowly, terrified of what he might find, but more terrified of disobeying. Their eyes met, and the air seemed to solidify in his lungs. King Alaric was younger than Malcolm had imagined, perhaps in his late 30s. His eyes were a startling amber, almost golden in the late afternoon light, wolf eyes, watchful and intelligent. His features were sculpted as if from granite, all sharp angles and uncompromising lines. He wore a simple black tunic, adorned only with a silver chain bearing the royal seal, a deliberate rejection of the ostentation his predecessor had favored. But what struck Malcolm most was the perfect stillness with which the king observed him. No fidgeting, no unnecessary movement, just absolute focus, as if Malcolm were a puzzle he intended to solve. "Your name," he said. Not a question, but a demand. "Malcolm, Your Majesty." His voice emerged as barely more than a whisper. Louder. Malcolm swallowed. "Malcolm, Your Majesty." "And how long have you lived among my wolves?" 10 years, Your Majesty." The king tilted his head slightly, his gaze unwavering. 10 years working in the kitchens, sleeping in the servants' quarters, speaking only when spoken to, making yourself invisible. The way he said it made it sound like an accusation. "Yes, Your Majesty." "And before that?" The question struck like a physical blow. Before that, before he had stumbled half-dead to the borders of wolf territory, fleeing horrors he refused to name even in the privacy of his own thoughts. "I traveled, Your Majesty, after the Great War. There was nowhere for someone like me to belong." A murmur rippled through the court. The Great War had decimated human civilization, leaving survivors scattered and vulnerable. Many had been absorbed into supernatural territories as servants, as laborers, as blood donors for vampires, as amusements for the Fae, as prey. King Alaric leaned forward slightly. "Someone like you," he repeated, his voice thoughtful. "And what exactly are you, Malcolm Thorne?" Confusion flooded Malcolm. "I am human, Your Majesty." "Are you?" The question hung in the air, deceptively casual yet weighted with implication. His heart stumbled in its rhythm. "Yes," he whispered, suddenly uncertain. "What else could I be?" Alaric studied him for another long moment, then abruptly rose from his throne. A collective intake of breath swept through the room as he descended the 3 steps that elevated his position and approached Malcolm directly. Up close, the king was even more intimidating. He towered over Malcolm, his presence seeming to fill all available space, compressing the air around them. Malcolm fought the instinct to step back, to run, knowing it would be both futile and dangerous. Never show fear to a predator. It was the first lesson any human learned upon entering wolf territory. Yet the king could smell his fear anyway. All of them could. 3 deaths in the past month, the king said, circling Malcolm slowly. 3 wolves found with their throats torn out. No scent trail, no witnesses, no enemies declaring responsibility. Ice flooded Malcolm's veins. Murders. Was he being accused of murder? I don't understand. What does this have to do with me?" Alaric stopped directly before him, so close Malcolm could feel the unnatural heat that radiated from his skin, a trait of his kind, this burning from within. "The first death occurred in the kitchen storage area," he said. "The second near the servants' quarters, the third in the herb garden, all places where you spend your time." Horror washed over Malcolm in a sickening wave. "You think Your Majesty, I could never, I wouldn't—" "What you could or couldn't do remains to be seen." Alaric's voice was dangerously soft. "But you were nearby each time, and yet, curiously, you saw nothing, heard nothing, know nothing." "Because there was nothing to know." The words burst from Malcolm before he could stop them, louder and more desperate than he intended. A low growl rumbled through the chamber, not from the king, but from the assembled wolves, warning him of his insolence. Alaric silenced them with a barely perceptible gesture, his eyes never leaving Malcolm's, searching, probing, as if he could extract the truth through will alone. 10 years you've lived among us," he said. 10 years we've sheltered you, fed you, protected you, and in return, you've given us what exactly?" Malcolm opened his mouth, but no words came. What had he given them? Labor? Yes. Obedience, certainly. But was that enough to justify his existence in their world? "Take him to the holding cells," Alaric commanded, suddenly turning away. "We'll continue this discussion when he's had time to reconsider his loyalties." "No!" The cry tore from Malcolm's throat. "Please, Your Majesty, I've done nothing wrong. I know nothing about these murders." But Alaric was already ascending the steps back to his throne, his broad back a wall between them, his decision made. Hands grasped Malcolm's arms, not cruelly, but with implacable strength. As the guards began to lead him away, he felt something shift inside him, a spark of something he had thought long extinguished: indignation, anger, the faintest ember of defiance. "I have been loyal," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I have been grateful. I have been invisible because that's what you all wanted, a human who knew his place. But I did not kill anyone." The Alpha King paused, one hand resting on the arm of his throne. Without turning, he spoke, his words carrying easily across the now silent chamber. "We shall see what you are, Malcolm Thorne, and what you are capable of, tomorrow." As the guards dragged him away, Malcolm clutched his father's pendant, feeling its familiar edges press into his palm. Stand your ground, even when outmatched. Tomorrow, it seemed, he would need all the courage he could find. The holding cell was not what Malcolm expected. No dank dungeon or iron bars, but a Spartan chamber with stone walls, a narrow bed, a small table with a pitcher of water, and a window too high and narrow to offer escape. A prison disguised as hospitality, much like his entire existence among the wolves. Night had fallen, and moonlight spilled through the window in a silvery rectangle across the floor. He sat on the edge of the bed, still clutching his father's pendant, its familiar weight the only comfort in this unfamiliar space. 10 years of careful invisibility, undone in a single afternoon. 10 years of survival, threatened by crimes he hadn't committed. The memory of the Alpha King's eyes haunted him, those amber depths that seemed to see through the careful facade he'd constructed around himself. "Are you?" he had asked when Malcolm claimed to be human. The question echoed in his mind, stirring uncertainties he'd buried long ago. Of course he was human. What else could he possibly be? A soft knock broke through his thoughts. The door opened to reveal a female wolf. He recognized Elena, one of the king's advisors. Unlike most wolves who viewed humans with disdain at best, she had always treated Malcolm with a detached sort of kindness. She carried a tray with bread, cheese, and a steaming mug that filled the room with the scent of chamomile. "You should eat," she said, setting the tray on the table. Malcolm remained seated, watchful. "Am I to be well fed before my execution?" A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed her face. "Is that what you think is happening here?" 3 murdered wolves, convenient human scapegoat. What else should I think? Elena studied him, her head tilted slightly to one side. She was older than most of the wolves in Alaric's court. Silver threading through her auburn hair, fine lines at the corners of her eyes, age that spoke of wisdom and survival in a world where both were rare commodities. "If King Alaric wanted you dead, Malcolm, you would already be dead." She gestured to the food. "Eat. You'll need your strength for tomorrow." "What happens tomorrow?" he asked, even as he reached for the bread, his body betraying his mind's suspicion with its hunger. "Questions," she replied simply. "Many questions." "I've told the truth already. I know nothing about the murders." "Perhaps." She moved to the window, gazing out at the night sky. "But you know other things, don't you? Things you've kept hidden." His hand froze midway to his mouth. "What do you mean?" 10 years you've lived among wolves, Malcolm. 10 years surrounded by creatures who can hear a heartbeat quicken with a lie, who can smell fear and secrets and sorrow. She turned back to him, her expression unreadable. "Did you really think no one noticed?" A chill spread through him. "Noticed what?" "Your nightmares, for one. The entire servants' wing knows you wake up screaming at least once a week, though you've become quite skilled at muffling the sound." Her eyes were unnervingly perceptive. "And then there's the matter of your scent." Malcolm set the bread down, appetite vanishing. "My scent?" "Humans have a particular smell, not unpleasant, just distinctive. Your scent has always been unusual, muted somehow, as if something is masking what you truly are." His mouth went dry. "I'm just a human who wants to survive." "Perhaps," she said again, that single word carrying volumes of doubt. "But survival requires adaptation, and you've adapted too well, haven't you? 10 years, and not a single wolf has threatened you, challenged you, or attempted to claim you." The implication hung in the air between them. Human men in wolf territories often faced the same dangers as women, their lack of supernatural strength making them vulnerable targets. Malcolm had attributed his relative safety to his deliberate invisibility, to making himself as unremarkable as possible. "I've been lucky," he whispered. Elena's smile held no warmth. "There is no such thing as luck in a wolf pack, Malcolm. There is only strength and strategy." She moved toward the door. "Rest now. Tomorrow we'll test both." The door closed behind her with a soft click, followed by the more ominous sound of a key turning in the lock. Malcolm stared at the food she had brought, suddenly suspicious. Was it drugged? Poisoned? But if they wanted him dead, as Elena had pointed out, there were far more efficient methods. He forced himself to eat, mechanically chewing and swallowing without tasting. He needed strength, whatever tomorrow might bring. As he sipped the tea, memories surfaced unbidden, memories he had spent 10 years trying to submerge beneath the tedium of daily survival. The sound of screaming, the acrid smell of smoke, his father's face, pale and determined in the firelight. "Run. Don't look back. Don't ever tell them what you are." Malcolm set the mug down with trembling hands. Don't ever tell them what you are. But what was he? Just human. Just a survivor. Just a man with nowhere else to go. Wasn't he? Sleep came in fitful bursts, haunted by fragments of nightmares. Familiar terrors twisted into new forms. In his dreams, he stood before the Alpha King's throne, but the throne room stretched endlessly, the king's face obscured in shadow. "What are you?" Alaric demanded over and over, his voice growing louder until it became a roar that shook the very foundations of the castle. Malcolm tried to answer, but his voice was gone, his throat closed around words he couldn't form. He woke with a gasp just as dawn was breaking, thin gray light filtering through the narrow window. His body ached from tension, his nightclothes clinging to sweat-dampened skin. Before he could fully gather his thoughts, the door opened. 2 male guards entered, their expressions professional and detached. "You're to bathe and change," one of them said, gesturing to a door Malcolm hadn't noticed the night before. "Everything you need is inside." Malcolm wanted to ask questions. What was happening? Where would he be taken? What the Alpha King planned? But the guards' closed expressions suggested answers would not be forthcoming. Instead, he obeyed, moving to the small adjoining bathing chamber, where he found a copper tub filled with steaming water, scented oils, and clean towels. The unexpected luxury was more unsettling than comforting. Why provide such care for a suspected murderer? Unless this was not about the murders at all. He bathed quickly, scrubbing away the sweat of fear and the lingering scent of kitchen herbs that usually clung to his skin. When he returned to the main chamber wrapped in a towel, he found clothing laid out on the freshly made bed. Not the plain gray tunic and trousers of a servant that he was accustomed to, but something finer. Not ornate court dress, but the attire of a warrior, a deep blue tunic with subtle silver embroidery at the collar, black trousers of finer cloth than he'd worn in a decade, and boots of supple leather. Clothing that would mark him as neither servant nor noble, but something else entirely. "Put them on," one of the guards instructed, neither hostile nor friendly. Malcolm dressed with fingers that fumbled at the unfamiliar fastenings. The clothes fit perfectly. Another unsettling detail. Who had taken his measurements? Who had selected garments that complemented his coloring and build when he had spent 10 years ensuring no one looked at him closely enough to notice such things? One of the guards approached with a comb. "Your hair," he said. Malcolm sat stiffly as the guard removed his practical tie and combed out his dark hair until it fell to his shoulders in waves. The gentle treatment felt alien after years of keeping himself deliberately plain, deliberately forgettable. "Why are you doing this?" he finally asked. The guard paused, comb mid-stroke. "The Alpha King's orders." "But why would he care how I look?" The guard resumed combing, his movements methodical. "It is not my place to question the Alpha King's commands." The echo of Thor's words from yesterday sent a shiver through Malcolm. No one questioned the Alpha King, not his warriors, not his advisors, certainly not a human man accused of murder. He closed his eyes, trying to steady his breathing, to find some kernel of strength within the fear. Stand your ground, even when outmatched. His father's words came back to him, carried on the weight of the silver pendant that still hung around his neck, the one personal item they had allowed him to keep. His fingers found it automatically, tracing its familiar contours. A crescent moon with a small star nestled in its curve. A simple design that had always brought him comfort. When the guards finally led him from the room, Malcolm walked with his head high, though his heart raced with apprehension. They moved through corridors he had never seen, climbing higher within the castle, away from the public areas, and deeper into the private domains of the Pax elite. The opulence increased with each turn. Tapestries gave way to original paintings, stone floors to rich carpets, iron sconces to crystal fixtures. Finally, they stopped before a set of double doors carved with an intricate forest scene. wolves running beneath a full moon, the craftsmanship so fine that the animals seemed almost to move in the shifting light. One guard knocked, and a deep voice commanded them to enter. The room beyond was unexpected. Not a formal audience chamber, but something more intimate. A study, perhaps, with walls lined with books, comfortable seating arranged around a hearth where a fire crackled despite the warmth of the spring morning, tall windows overlooking the mountains that cradled the Pack's territory. And there, standing with his back to them, gazing out one of those windows, was the Alpha King. "Leave us," he said without turning. The guards withdrew immediately, closing the doors behind them with a soft thud that felt somehow final. For several long moments, Alaric remained at the window, and Malcolm remained just inside the doorway, the silence stretching between them, taut as a bowstring. Malcolm studied the king in the diffuse morning light, the broad shoulders beneath a simple white shirt, the dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck, the hands clasped behind his back, powerful even in repose. When Alaric finally turned, his amber eyes swept over Malcolm, taking in the warrior's attire, the loose hair, the silver pendant at his throat. Something flickered across his face, too quick to name, gone before Malcolm could interpret it. "Do you know why wolves are successful predators, Malcolm?" he asked, his voice deceptively conversational. The unexpected question caught Malcolm off guard. Because they're strong?" "Partially." Alaric moved toward a sideboard where a carafe of water and 2 glasses waited. "But there are stronger creatures, bears, mountain lions." He poured water into both glasses. "No, wolves succeed because they observe. They learn patterns. They understand weakness and strength, both in their prey and in themselves." He offered Malcolm a glass. "They are patient." Malcolm stepped forward to accept the water, careful to avoid touching the king's fingers. "Is that why I'm here? Because you've been observing me for 10 years? A hint of a smile touched Alaric's lips. "You assume much importance. You summoned me before your entire court, accused me of murder, imprisoned me, and now this." Malcolm gestured at his altered appearance. "I think I'm entitled to assume something is happening that concerns me directly." Alaric raised an eyebrow, and Malcolm immediately regretted his boldness. But instead of anger, something like approval flashed in the king's eyes. "So the mouse has teeth after all," he murmured. He gestured to a chair. "Sit." Malcolm perched on the edge of the indicated seat, back straight, knees pressed together, the glass of water clutched in both hands. Alaric took the chair opposite his posture relaxed, yet still emanating authority. "The night you arrived at our borders," he said without preamble, "you were half dead from exposure, malnourished, your clothes torn, your feet bleeding. You begged for sanctuary, offering to work in exchange for protection. Do you remember what you said?" Malcolm swallowed. "I said I would do anything that was asked of me as long as I could stay within the Pack's territory." "Anything," Alaric repeated. "A dangerous promise for a lone human man to make to a wolf pack." "I had nothing left to lose," Malcolm whispered. The king's eyes darkened. "Everyone has something to lose, Malcolm Thorne, even those who believe themselves already stripped bare." He rose abruptly and crossed to a desk where a folder lay open. 10 years ago, I granted you sanctuary because my instincts told me you were more than you appeared." He lifted a paper from the folder. "Since then, I've had you watched." Cold dread pooled in Malcolm's stomach. "Watched. Not constantly, but regularly. Reports made on your activities, your habits, your anomalies." He looked up from the paper. "You never leave the castle grounds. You avoid conflict to an extraordinary degree. You flinch at loud noises. You sleep with a knife beneath your pillow. You speak to no one of your past." His eyes narrowed slightly. "And you age uncommonly slowly for a human." The accusation hung in the air between them. Malcolm tried to swallow, but his throat had gone dry. "I don't understand what you're implying." "I think you do." Alaric set the paper down. 3 wolves dead, Malcolm. 3 high-ranking members of my court, all killed in locations where you've been seen, all with nearly identical wounds, wounds that could have been made by a blade similar to the one you keep hidden beneath your mattress. "I need that knife for protection," Malcolm protested. "Any human living among wolves would be terrified," Alaric cut in. "Would show fear daily, hourly, would be desperate to leave, to find other humans, would age visibly over 10 years of constant stress." He took a step toward Malcolm. "But not you. You've adapted too well, almost as if you belong here." Malcolm's heart hammered against his ribs. "I don't know what you want me to say." The truth would be a start. Alaric closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. "What are you, Malcolm? What are you hiding?" "Nothing," Malcolm insisted, even as his father's voice echoed in his mind. "Don't ever tell them what you are." "You're lying." Alaric spoke without heat, a simple observation. "I can hear your heartbeat. I can smell your fear. Not the fear of false accusation, but the fear of discovery." He leaned down, his face inches from Malcolm's. 3 wolves dead, and I believe you know who killed them. I believe you know why." "I don't," Malcolm whispered. But even to his own ears, the denial sounded hollow. Alaric's eyes locked with his, searching, probing. "Then prove your innocence. Submit to the blood trial." Horror washed through Malcolm. The blood trial, an ancient werewolf ritual where the accused's blood was mixed with that of a royal wolf. The mixture would reveal truth or falsehood, innocence or guilt. But it would also reveal— "No," he breathed. "I can't." "Can't?" Alaric pressed. "Or won't? What would the blood trial reveal about you, Malcolm Thorne? What secrets does your blood carry?" Malcolm stood abruptly, nearly spilling the forgotten water in his hands. "I didn't kill anyone. I swear it on my father's grave." "Then you have nothing to fear from the trial." "Please," Malcolm said, desperation making him reckless. "There must be another way to prove my innocence." Alaric studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps there is," he said finally, "but it would require your complete cooperation, your complete honesty." "Anything," Malcolm said before he could stop himself. "Anything except the blood trial." A slow smile spread across Alaric's face, transforming his stern features into something unexpectedly appealing. "You should be more careful with that word. Anything is a dangerous promise." He returned to the desk and closed the folder. "You will remain within my personal quarters for the duration of this investigation. You will go nowhere without an escort. You will answer every question I ask with complete truthfulness." He fixed Malcolm with a penetrating gaze. "And you will help me find the real killer." "But how can I help? I know nothing." "You know more than you admit," Alaric interrupted. "Even to yourself, perhaps." He moved toward the door. "Rest today. Consider what I've said. Tomorrow we begin in earnest." He paused, hand on the doorknob. "One more thing, Malcolm Thorne. Whatever you are hiding, and you are hiding something, I will discover it. I am patient, but not endlessly so. Remember that." The door closed behind him, leaving Malcolm alone in the opulent room, clutching a glass of water he had not drunk, wearing clothes he had not chosen, facing a future that seemed to be unraveling with every passing hour. 10 years of careful anonymity shattered. 10 years of secrets threatened. 3 murdered wolves and an alpha king who believed Malcolm held the key to solving their deaths. His fingers found his father's pendant again, its familiar weight both comfort and burden. Don't ever tell them what you are. But what if he had no choice? That night, Malcolm dreamed of fire again, of smoke filling his lungs and screams echoing through the night, of his father's face, illuminated by flames as he pressed the silver pendant into Malcolm's palm. "Run, son. Don't look back. Don't ever tell them what you are." He woke gasping, tangled in sheets finer than any he had slept on in years. For a disorienting moment, he didn't know where he was. The soft bed, the elegant furnishings, the pale morning light filtering through gauzy curtains, all unfamiliar. Then memory returned in a sickening rush. The Alpha King's private quarters, 3 dead wolves, suspicion and secrets, and the looming threat of the blood trial. Malcolm sat up, pushing sweat-dampened hair from his face. The room he'd been given was small but luxurious, adjoining the study where Alaric had questioned him. A beautiful cage, but a cage nonetheless. A soft knock at the door startled him. "Yes?" he called, pulling the covers higher. The door opened to reveal a young male wolf, probably no more than 16 or 17. He carried a tray with bread, fruit, and what smelled like strong coffee. His eyes remained downcast, clearly uncomfortable serving a human who had been elevated from the kitchens to the king's personal quarters overnight. "The Alpha King requests your presence in 1 hour," he said, setting the tray on a small table near the window. "I'm to help you prepare." "What's your name?" Malcolm asked as the young wolf moved to open the curtains fully. He hesitated as if surprised by the question. "Gareth, sir." "I'm Malcolm, not sir." The formality felt wrong coming from someone wearing the emblem of a royal page. "The Alpha King was very specific about how you're to be dressed." A hint of nervousness colored Gareth's voice. "He said you're to attend a council meeting." "A council meeting?" Malcolm's stomach tightened with anxiety. The highest-ranking wolves in the pack would be there. The ones most likely to see through any deception, to notice any slip he might make, the ones most likely to demand the blood trial. He forced himself to eat while Gareth laid out another new outfit. This one more formal than yesterday's, with a deep blue tunic embroidered with silver thread at the collar and cuffs. When Malcolm finished eating, the young wolf helped him dress, then arranged his hair, pulling part of it back with a simple silver clasp. "You have unusual hair for a human," Gareth commented softly, "almost like a wolf's winter coat." The innocent observation sent a chill through Malcolm. His dark hair, with its unusual silver-streaked temples, had appeared prematurely in his 20s. If only Gareth knew. "The Alpha King said to leave this on," the boy added, gently touching the crescent pendant at Malcolm's throat. "He said it seems important to you." Malcolm nodded wordlessly, his throat too tight for speech. Why was Alaric doing this? Dressing him like a warrior of rank, keeping him close, watching him with those penetrating amber eyes. What game was he playing? When Gareth finished his work, he stepped back to assess the result. "You look different," he said, a note of genuine surprise in his voice. Then more hesitantly, "Is it true what they're saying? That you know who killed those wolves?" "No," Malcolm said firmly. "I know nothing about the murders." Gareth studied his face, his young eyes more perceptive than Malcolm would have liked. "But you know something, don't you? Something important." Before Malcolm could respond, another knock came at the door, harder this time. Gareth jumped slightly, then moved to answer it. Thor stood in the doorway, his expression as impassive as ever. "The Alpha King is ready for him," he said to Gareth, who nodded and quickly departed. He turned his attention to Malcolm, his eyes taking in the formal attire, the arranged hair, the silver pendant. "You clean up well for a kitchen worker," he observed dryly. "I'm not," Malcolm began, then stopped himself. He wasn't what? A kitchen worker? A murderer? A simple human man? None of those were entirely true anymore, if they ever had been. Thor's mouth quirked slightly, as if he'd heard Malcolm's unspoken thoughts. "Come, the council doesn't like to be kept waiting." He led Malcolm through corridors even more opulent than those he'd seen yesterday, deeper into the heart of the castle, where only the most elite wolves were permitted. The air itself seemed different here, heavier with power, with history, with the weight of decisions that affected thousands. They stopped before a set of double doors carved with the pack's emblem, a wolf howling beneath a crescent moon. Thor gave Malcolm a sidelong glance. "Whatever game you and the Alpha King are playing," he said quietly, "be careful. There are those on the council who would see you executed simply for being human, murder accusations aside." Before Malcolm could ask what he meant by game, Thor pushed the doors open, and they entered the council chamber. It was a circular room dominated by a round table of dark wood polished to a mirror shine. Around it sat 12 wolves, 6 male and 6 female, each emanating the unmistakable aura of power that came with high rank. At the head of the table, in a chair slightly larger than the others, sat the Alpha King. All eyes turned to Malcolm as he entered. Some gazes were merely curious, others openly hostile. One older female with steel-gray hair watched him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. "Ah, Malcolm," Alaric said, his deep voice filling the chamber. "Join us." Thor guided him to an empty chair directly to the king's right, a position of honor that caused a ripple of murmurs among the council members. Malcolm sat stiffly, acutely aware of his vulnerability in this room full of predators. "For those who haven't been introduced," the king continued, "this is Malcolm Thorne. He has lived among our pack for 10 years, working primarily in the kitchens. He is helping with our investigation into the recent murders." "Helping?" The word came from a broad-shouldered male with a scarred face. "Or being investigated?" "Both, perhaps," Alaric replied smoothly. Malcolm was in proximity to all 3 murder sites, yet he himself is not a wolf, which raises interesting questions about how a human might overpower 3 of our strongest warriors. "Unless he's not human," said the steel-haired woman, her voice sharp as a blade. "The blood trial would settle that question immediately." Malcolm tensed, fingers automatically seeking his pendant. Alaric noticed the gesture, his amber eyes narrowing slightly. "The blood trial remains an option," he said, "but I prefer to exhaust other avenues of investigation first." He turned to a thin wolf with spectacles perched on his nose. "Declan, what have you learned about the murder weapon?" Declan cleared his throat. "Based on the wounds, we're looking for a blade. Silver, most likely, given how the flesh refused to heal even after death. Approximately 6 inches long, extremely sharp, wielded with considerable force." "Silver," murmured the king, his gaze flicking to Malcolm's pendant. "Interesting." "I don't have a silver blade," Malcolm said, unable to keep silent under the weight of implication. "The knife I keep is steel. For protection, nothing more." "So you say," the scarred wolf growled. "Peace, Victor," the king commanded. "We're here to investigate, not accuse." He turned to another council member. "Helena, what of the timing?" The woman addressed, younger than most at the table with calculating eyes, consulted a ledger before her. All 3 murders occurred during the full moon, when most wolves were either transformed or distracted by the hunt. The victims were found in isolated areas of the castle, killed quickly and efficiently. No signs of struggle, no defensive wounds, suggesting they knew their killer. Or at least didn't perceive them as a threat, Alaric concluded. His words hung in the air, their implication clear. A human in a wolf pack was never perceived as a threat, especially not a quiet, obedient human who had spent years making himself invisible. "What were the victims doing in those locations?" Malcolm asked suddenly, drawing surprised looks from around the table. "The kitchen storage, the servants' wing, the herb garden, none of those are places high-ranking wolves typically visit." Alaric's mouth curved in what might have been approval. "An excellent question. Helena?" Helena frowned at her ledger. "Counselor Damon was found in the kitchen storage area. According to the staff, he had gone to inspect a shipment of wine that had arrived that day." "Wine?" Malcolm repeated, his mind racing. "The kitchen received a shipment of silverthorn wine the day of the first murder. It's extremely rare. The head cook mentioned it was reserved exclusively for the Alpha and Council." A flicker of interest crossed the king's face. "And the second victim, Counselor Reed?" Helena continued. "He was found near the servants' quarters. He had gone to speak with the head of housekeeping about preparations for the upcoming Alliance gathering." "The Alliance gathering?" Malcolm murmured, memories stirring. "The servants have been preparing guest quarters for weeks. Cleaning, replacing linens, arranging—" "Arranging what?" the king pressed. "Silver," Malcolm said, the realization dawning. "Silver candlesticks, silver serving pieces, silver ceremonial items, all being polished and inventoried for the gathering." A tense silence fell over the chamber. Silver was precious to wolves, not just for its value, but for its ceremonial significance in pack rituals. It was also one of the few materials that could truly harm them. "And the third victim?" the king asked quietly. "Counselor Livia," Helena said, her voice softening slightly. "Found in the herb garden at dawn, the morning after the full moon." "She often walked there," Malcolm said, remembering the elegant female wolf who had sometimes nodded to him as he worked among the plants. She said the scent of herbs helped clear her mind after a transformation. "What specific herbs were you working with the day she died?" the king asked. Malcolm closed his eyes, thinking back. Moonflower, wolfsbane, silver sage. He stopped, the pattern suddenly, horribly clear. Silver. All 3 murders connected to silver. Alaric's eyes locked with his, a silent communication passing between them. "Not just silver," the king said softly. "Silver connected to the royal house, royal wine, royal ceremonial items, royal herbs." The implications settled over the council like a dark cloud. These weren't random killings. They were targeted attacks against the pack's leadership, perhaps against the Alpha King himself. "This changes things," the steel-haired woman said, her hostility toward Malcolm noticeably diminished. "We're not looking for a rogue killer. We're looking for a traitor." "Or an outside enemy," added Declan. "The southern packs have been restless since King Alaric took the throne. They might have planted an assassin." "If the human is innocent," Victor said, still glowering at Malcolm, "let him submit to the blood trial. Let him prove his humanity and his loyalty." Malcolm's breath caught. The blood trial would reveal his innocence of murder. Yes, but it would expose other secrets, truths he had buried so deeply he sometimes forgot they existed. The Alpha King rose slowly, his presence commanding immediate silence. "The blood trial is a sacred ritual, not to be used lightly. For now, Malcolm remains under my protection and my supervision." His voice carried the unmistakable weight of absolute authority. "He will continue to assist with the investigation. The rest of you will increase security, particularly around anything connected to silver or royal ceremonial items." He gestured to Malcolm. "Come, we have matters to discuss privately." Malcolm stood on legs that felt unsteady, aware of the council's eyes following him as Thor escorted them from the chamber. Once the doors closed behind them, he released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "You did well," Alaric said, surprising him. "I didn't do anything," Malcolm replied. "You observed. You made connections others missed." He studied Malcolm thoughtfully. "You've been watching us for 10 years, haven't you? Learning our patterns, our weaknesses, just as we've been watching you." There was no accusation in his voice, merely a statement of fact. Still, it unnerved Malcolm how accurately Alaric had assessed his survival strategy. "What happens now?" he asked, as they walked down a corridor he didn't recognize. "Now," Alaric said, "we set a trap for our killer." He stopped before another door, this one unadorned except for a simple carving of a wolf at its center. "These are my private chambers. Few are permitted to enter. You'll be safer here than anywhere else in the castle." The room beyond was unexpectedly austere for an Alpha King, spacious but simply furnished with a large bed, a sitting area before a fireplace, and windows overlooking the mountains. Books filled shelves along one wall, their spines worn with use. No ostentatious displays of wealth or power, just the quiet confidence of a leader who had no need to prove his dominance. "Why are you doing this?" Malcolm asked, unable to contain the question any longer. "Why dress me like this? Seat me at your right hand? Bring me into your private chambers? What do you want from me?" Alaric closed the door and leaned against it, his amber eyes never leaving Malcolm's. "I think you know." "I don't," Malcolm insisted, though a fluttering sensation in his stomach suggested otherwise. 10 years, Alaric said, his voice low. 10 years I've watched you move through my castle like a ghost, present but not seen, heard but not listened to. 10 years of reports about the human man who never complained, never caused trouble, never connected with anyone. He pushed away from the door, moving toward Malcolm with the fluid grace of a predator. "But I saw you. I saw how you observed everything, understood everyone, adapted to survive in a world that should have crushed you." He stopped just before Malcolm, close enough that Malcolm could feel the unnatural heat radiating from his skin. "I want to know what you are, Malcolm, what you're hiding, why you came to us, but most of all—" He reached out, his fingers brushing Malcolm's cheek in a touch so light he might have imagined it. "I want to know why, of all the places you could have run to, you chose a wolf pack." His touch lingered on Malcolm's skin like a whisper of flame. Malcolm should have stepped back, maintained distance, preserved the careful walls he'd built around himself. Instead, he remained frozen, caught in the amber intensity of Alaric's gaze. "I didn't choose a wolf pack," he said finally, his voice barely audible even in the quiet room. "I was running from something worse." A shadow crossed Alaric's face. "The Great War." Malcolm turned away, unable to bear the weight of his scrutiny. When the dust settled and the survivors emerged, things changed. Humans became commodities. Alaric was silent for a moment. "Vampires," he said. Not a question, but a conclusion. Malcolm nodded, memories rising unbidden. The raid on their settlement, the screams in the night, his father shoving him through a hidden cellar door as heavy footsteps approached their home. "They attacked our village," he continued, his gaze fixed on the mountains visible through the window. "They called it a harvest. My father hid me, but they took others, everyone." His fingers found the pendant at his throat. "I ran for days before I reached your borders. And you chose to beg sanctuary from wolves rather than risk capture by vampires," Alaric said. His voice held a note of understanding. "A reasonable choice, but not the whole truth, is it?" Malcolm turned back to face him. "What more do you want from me?" "Everything," Alaric said simply. The word hung in the air between them, laden with implications Malcolm wasn't ready to face. He moved to the fireplace, seeking distance, seeking warmth against the chill that had settled in his core at the mention of vampires. "The murders," he said, deliberately changing the subject. "You said we're setting a trap for the killer. How?" Alaric allowed the deflection, though his eyes told Malcolm their conversation was merely postponed, not forgotten. "The pattern is clear now. The killer targets wolves connected to silver and royal ceremonies." He moved to join Malcolm by the fire. "The next full moon is in 3 days. The Alliance gathering begins the day after." "You're going to use the gathering as bait," Malcolm realized. "All that silver, all those high-ranking wolves in one place. A temptation our killer won't be able to resist. But first, we need to narrow down our suspects." Alaric's amber eyes studied Malcolm's face. "You still think it might be me?" Malcolm couldn't keep the hurt from his voice. "After what happened in the council meeting—" "No," Alaric interrupted. "You've helped identify a pattern that exonerates you, but your connection to these events remains significant. 3 locations you frequent, 3 times you were nearby but saw nothing. So I'm still a suspect." "You're a mystery," he corrected, "and I've always been drawn to mysteries." Something in his tone made Malcolm look up sharply. There was a warmth in Alaric's eyes that hadn't been there before. A heat that had nothing to do with interrogation and everything to do with the diminishing space between them. "King Alaric," Malcolm began. "Just Alaric," he said quietly, "when we're alone." The intimacy of the request startled Malcolm. "I can't. You're the Alpha King. And you're the only person in my territory who looks me in the eye without fear or agenda." His mouth quirked in a half-smile. "It's refreshing." "I'm afraid of you," Malcolm protested weakly. "No." Alaric stepped closer. "You're afraid of what I might discover about you, not of me." He was right, Malcolm realized with a jolt of surprise. Somewhere between being dragged before his throne and sitting at his right hand in the council meeting, his fear of Alaric personally had evaporated. He feared exposure, feared the blood trial, feared the truth he had buried, but not the man standing before him. "Alaric," he conceded, the name feeling strange on his tongue. Alaric's smile widened, transforming his stern features into something almost boyish. "Better." He moved to a side table where a decanter and glasses waited. "Wine?" "It's barely midday," Malcolm pointed out. "A small indulgence." Alaric poured 2 glasses of ruby liquid. "One of the few privileges of leadership." Malcolm accepted the offered glass cautiously. "Speaking of leadership, won't the council think it strange that you've closeted yourself with your main murder suspect?" "Let them think what they will." He raised his glass in a subtle toast. "They believe I'm interrogating you. In a way, I am." Malcolm sipped the wine. Rich, complex, warming. "And what do you want to know?" "Everything," Alaric repeated. "But let's start with the pendant." Malcolm's free hand flew to the silver crescent at his throat. "It was my father's." "A crescent moon with a star," Alaric observed. "An unusual choice for a human man living in a world where supernatural creatures are known by their connection to the moon." Malcolm looked away. "It was a family heirloom." Alaric didn't push further, but Malcolm could feel his assessment, his gathering of clues. "Tell me about your nightmares." The abrupt change of subject caught Malcolm off guard. "How do you know about them?" "The servants' quarters have thin walls, and wolves have excellent hearing." He moved to sit in one of the chairs flanking the fireplace, gesturing for Malcolm to take the other. "You cry out in your sleep, names sometimes, pleas for someone to run, to hide." Malcolm sat stiffly, cradling the wineglass. "They're just dreams." "Are they? Or memories?" "Both," he wanted to say. Memories twisted by guilt and fear into nightmares that haunted him even in his waking hours. "The night the vampires came," he said instead. "I saw things no one should see, heard things." He swallowed hard. "Is it any wonder I have nightmares?" Alaric studied him over the rim of his glass. "And the names you call out?" "Thorn, Lyall." Ice flooded Malcolm's veins. Those names. Names he had buried so deeply he'd almost forgotten them himself. Names from before, from another life. "My father's name was Thorn," he said cautiously. "Lyall was a friend from our village. They didn't survive." It wasn't entirely a lie. They hadn't survived as the people they had been. None of them had. Alaric's gaze didn't waver. "I think you're telling me partial truths, Malcolm, enough to satisfy my questions without revealing what you're truly hiding." "Isn't that what everyone does?" Malcolm countered. "Reveal only what's necessary, keep the rest protected?" "Most people, yes." Alaric set his glass aside. "But we're not most people, are we?" The question hung in the air, dangerous in its simplicity. Not most people, not most humans, not most wolves. Something else, something between, something both more and less than either. A knock at the door saved Malcolm from having to answer. Alaric frowned at the interruption, but called permission to enter. Thor appeared, his expression grave. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty, but there's been another attack." Alaric was on his feet immediately, all traces of warmth vanishing beneath the mantle of Alpha King. "Who?" "Helena from the council. She was inspecting the ceremonial chamber for the Alliance gathering. Someone struck her from behind." "Is she dead?" Malcolm asked, his heart racing. Thor glanced at him, surprised by his interruption. "No, injured but alive. She fought back." "Did she see her attacker?" Alaric demanded. "No, but—" Thor hesitated. "She caught a scent. Not wolf, not entirely human either. Something in between." Alaric's eyes snapped to Malcolm, sharp with renewed suspicion. "Where was the attack?" "The ceremonial chamber in the West Wing. The silver crown was stolen, the one traditionally worn by the Alpha Queen during Alliance rituals." A heavy silence fell. The silver crown, a powerful symbol of the Pack's lineage and future. Its theft was not just a crime, but a statement, a challenge to Alaric's reign and legitimacy. "Take me to her," Alaric ordered. He turned to Malcolm. "You'll come too." "Is that wise?" Thor asked. "If the killer is targeting those connected to royal symbols, then Malcolm is safer with me than anywhere else," Alaric finished. "And I want him to hear Helena's account firsthand." The walk to the infirmary was tense, guards flanking them on all sides. Word of the attack had spread quickly, and wolves stopped to bow as they passed, their eyes following Malcolm with renewed suspicion. He had been seated at the Alpha King's right hand in council that morning. Hours later, another council member had been attacked. The timing would seem suspicious to anyone. Helena lay on a bed in a private room, a bandage wrapped around her head, her face pale but her eyes alert. She struggled to sit up when they entered, but Alaric gestured for her to remain lying down. "Tell me what happened," he said without preamble. "I was checking the ceremonial items as you ordered," she began, her voice strained. "Making sure everything was accounted for, properly secured. I felt a presence. Before I could turn, something struck me here. She touched the bandage. I managed to twist around to lash out. I caught fabric, I think, tore it, and there was a scent. Not wolf, not human, Alaric prompted. She nodded slowly. Something else, something I've never encountered before. Her eyes drifted to Malcolm. But similar to him somehow. Not the same, but related. Malcolm felt the weight of Alaric's gaze, heavy with renewed doubt, with questions he couldn't answer without destroying everything. The crown, Helena continued. They took only the crown, left the other silver pieces, even though some are more valuable. It's symbolic, Malcolm said quietly. The attacks aren't about wealth or even killing. They're about challenging authority. Alaric's head turned sharply toward him. Explain. The first 3 victims were all council members who supported your ascension to the throne, Malcolm said, pieces falling into place as he spoke. The silver items connected to royal ceremonies, and now the Queen's crown. He met Alaric's eyes directly. Someone's challenging your right to rule, challenging your legitimacy. Helena's eyes widened. The Southern Pax. They never accepted a Northern wolf as High Alpha. But they've made no open moves against us, Thor objected. Open moves would mean war, Malcolm pointed out. This way, they undermine from within, create fear, suspicion, instability. Alaric was watching him with an intensity that seemed to see through skin and bone to the secrets beneath. And how would a simple kitchen worker understand pack politics so thoroughly? Malcolm swallowed. I listen. I observe. I've had 10 years to learn how wolves think. Alaric held his gaze a moment longer, then turned back to Helena. Rest. Heal. Tell no one what we've discussed. He glanced at Thor. Double the guards on all entrances. Check everyone coming and going. Wolves, humans, everyone. And the alliance gathering? Thor asked. Proceeds as planned, Alaric said, his mouth set in a grim line. But quietly spread word that the Queen's crown will be used in the main ceremony. A trap, Thor realized. When the killer comes for it, we'll be waiting. Alaric's eyes glinted with dangerous promise. As they left the infirmary, his hand settled at the small of Malcolm's back, a gesture that seemed both protective and possessive. It drew curious glances from passing wolves, whispers that followed in their wake. They're talking, Malcolm murmured. Let them, Alaric replied, unconcerned. To what purpose? Alaric guided him around a corner into a smaller corridor, away from prying eyes. To draw out the killer, he said quietly. They've been watching you as I have, using you as their cover. Now they'll see you growing closer to me, gaining influence, becoming... He stopped abruptly. Becoming what? Malcolm pressed. Alaric's amber eyes gleamed in the dim light of the corridor. A threat to their plans. Understanding dawned. You're using me as bait. Not just bait, he corrected, his voice dropping to a near whisper. An ally, if you're willing. Malcolm should have been angry, should have objected to being used as a pawn in wolf politics. Instead, he felt a strange exhilaration. After 10 years of invisibility, of careful nothingness, he was being seen, being valued, being trusted, even if that trust was built on secrets and half-truths. I'm willing, he said, the words carrying more weight than he intended. Alaric's hand moved from Malcolm's back to his arm, a gentle grip just above his elbow. Good, he murmured, because I think we both know the killer will come for you next. His fingers tightened slightly. And when they do, I'll be waiting. The next 2 days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Alaric kept Malcolm close, a strategy both for his protection and to provoke their unknown enemy. They moved together through the castle, Alaric's hand often at the small of Malcolm's back, his attention conspicuously focused on him during meals and meetings. To the pack, it appeared their alpha king had developed a sudden, inexplicable fascination with a human man, a provocation to wolves who already questioned his judgment. To Malcolm, it felt like walking a knife's edge. Every shared glance, every brush of Alaric's fingers against his sent conflicting signals through his body, warning and wanting tangled together in a knot he couldn't unravel. He told himself it was pretense, strategy, nothing more. But in quiet moments, when Alaric's eyes held his a heartbeat too long, he wondered. "You're distracted," Alaric observed on the evening of the second day. They sat in his private study, reviewing security plans for the Alliance gathering. Maps and diagrams covered the table between them, marking guard positions and escape routes. "I'm tired," Malcolm admitted. He hesitated, then pushed forward. "And confused by all this." Alaric leaned back in his chair, amber eyes studying him. "By the murder investigation?" "By you," Malcolm said simply. "By why you're really keeping me so close." A smile tugged at the corner of Alaric's mouth. "Am I not being obvious enough?" Heat flooded Malcolm's cheeks. "You're the Alpha King. I'm a human kitchen worker. There's nothing obvious about any of this." "Isn't there?" Alaric rose and moved around the table, perching on its edge near Malcolm. "From the moment you arrived at our borders, half dead and defiant, you've been a puzzle I couldn't solve. A human man with the courage to look wolves in the eye. A survivor who chose the most dangerous sanctuary available rather than risk what waited beyond our borders." He reached out, his finger tracing the outline of Malcolm's pendant without touching it. "A man with secrets in his eyes and a silver crescent at his throat." Malcolm fought the urge to back away, to break the strange tension building between them. "So, I'm an interesting diversion from royal duties." "No." The word was soft but absolute. "You're much more than that, Malcolm. I think you've always known it." Before Malcolm could respond, a knock interrupted them. Thor entered, his expression carefully neutral as he took in their proximity. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty, but the advanced party from the Southern Pax has arrived early. Their Alpha is requesting an audience." Alaric straightened, his face sliding seamlessly into the impassive mask of leadership. "Very well. I'll receive him in the throne room." He glanced at Malcolm. "Malcolm will accompany me." Thor's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "I'll inform the guards." After he left, Alaric turned back to Malcolm. "The Southern Alpha will have brought his own guards, his own spies. If our killer is connected to the Southern Pax, as we suspect, this is our chance to observe potential conspirators." "What should I do?" Malcolm asked, suddenly uncertain of his role in this dangerous game. "Stand at my right hand," Alaric said, moving toward a cabinet where formal attire waited. "Watch. Listen. Use that remarkable perception of yours to notice what others miss. And if they ask who I am, why a human stands beside the Alpha King?" A slow, deliberate smile spread across Alaric's face. "Let them wonder." Half an hour later, Malcolm stood in the throne room beside Alaric as the Southern delegation was announced. His heart hammered in his chest, though he kept his expression composed. He wore yet another new garment, a formal tunic of deep blue with silver embroidery that matched his pendant, more regal than anything he could have imagined wearing 3 days ago. The Southern Alpha entered with an entourage of 6 wolves, all male, all radiating the controlled aggression of warriors in enemy territory. Their leader, Alpha Cain, was older than Alaric by perhaps 15 years. His dark hair streaked with silver, his face lined with experience and calculation. His eyes swept the throne room, assessing guards and exits before settling on Alaric. Then his gaze shifted to Malcolm, surprise flickering briefly across his features before being replaced by shrewd assessment. "Alpha King Alaric," he said, offering the formal bow of one pack leader to another. "I thank you for your hospitality. We did not expect to arrive before the gathering, but our journey was swifter than anticipated." "Alpha Cain," Alaric acknowledged. "The Northern Territories welcome you and your wolves." His tone was cordial but cool. The tension between the two packs was an unspoken current in the air. Cain's eyes slid to Malcolm again. "I see you've made interesting changes since I was last here." Alaric's hand came to rest lightly at the small of Malcolm's back, a gesture of possession that sent a shiver up his spine. "Change is the nature of leadership, is it not? Those who cannot adapt do not survive long as Alpha." The implied criticism was subtle but clear. Cain had been Alpha of the Southern Pax for over 20 years, maintaining power through rigid adherence to tradition rather than innovation. "Indeed," Kane replied, his smile not reaching his eyes, "though some traditions exist for good reason." His gaze lingered on Malcolm, curious and calculating. "I was not aware you had taken a human consort." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Consort. Not mate, a wolf term reserved for their own kind, but consort, implying something temporary, lesser. Before Alaric could respond, Malcolm spoke. "I am not his consort," he said, his voice clear in the hushed throne room. "I am his advisor on human affairs." Kane's eyebrows rose. "A human advisor? How progressive of you, Alaric." Alaric's thumb traced a small circle against Malcolm's back, a silent signal of approval. "The world changed after the Great War. Those who ignore the perspectives of other species do so at their peril." "Perhaps," Kane conceded, though his tone suggested disagreement. "I look forward to discussing such philosophies during the gathering." His gaze hardened slightly. "Along with more pressing matters, the recent murders within your pack, for instance." A subtle shift ran through Alaric's posture, barely perceptible, but Malcolm felt it in the tension of his body beside him. "News travels quickly," Alaric observed neutrally. "As does concern," Kane countered. 3 council members dead, a 4th attacked, rumors of silver weapons and stolen ceremonial items. He spread his hands in a gesture of false concern. "Some might question whether the Northern Territories remain stable under your leadership." The threat beneath his words was clear. The Alliance gathering would bring alphas from all territories together, a rare opportunity for a vote of no confidence, for challenge, for shifting power. "Your concern is noted," Alaric said, his voice deceptively mild, "but unnecessary. The situation is well in hand." His fingers pressed against Malcolm's back, drawing him a half-step closer to his side. "In fact, we've made significant progress in identifying the culprit." Something flickered across Kane's face. Discomfort? Concern? It was gone too quickly to interpret. "I'm relieved to hear it. The safety of all alphas at the gathering must be assured." "Of course," Alaric agreed. "Now you must be weary from your journey. Thor will show you to your quarters. We've prepared the East Wing for your delegation." Kane bowed again, the gesture precise to the exact degree required by protocol. No more, no less. "Until tomorrow, then." As he straightened, his eyes met Malcolm's one last time, searching, assessing. Malcolm held his gaze steadily, revealing nothing. After the southern wolves had been escorted out, Alaric remained standing beside the throne, his expression thoughtful. "You noticed it," he said. "Not a question, but a confirmation." "His reaction when you mentioned progress in the investigation," Malcolm replied quietly. "He was surprised, maybe concerned." "Yes," Alaric's voice was grim, "and his early arrival is convenient for someone who might want to observe our security arrangements before the gathering." "You think he's behind the murders?" Alaric shook his head slowly. "Not directly. Kane is too cautious, too aware of consequences. But he might have sanctioned them, might be sheltering the killer among his wolves." He turned to Malcolm. "What did you make of his reaction to you? Confusion? Calculation?" Malcolm hesitated. "And something else. Recognition, almost." Alaric's eyes sharpened. "Recognition? Had you encountered him before?" "No," Malcolm said quickly. "Not him specifically, but the way he looked at me. It was as if I reminded him of someone." Alaric was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant, thoughtful. "The full moon is tomorrow night," he said finally. "The formal alliance gathering begins the following morning. If our killer follows their pattern, they'll strike during the moon, when most wolves are distracted by the change." "I'm not safe," Malcolm realized aloud. "If they've been watching, they know I'm helping you, that I'm a threat to their plans." "No," Alaric agreed, his voice softening. "You're not safe." He reached up, his fingers brushing a strand of dark hair from Malcolm's face. "But I have no intention of letting you out of my sight." The intensity in his eyes made Malcolm's breath catch. This was no longer merely strategy, no longer simply protection. There was something deeper growing between them, something dangerous and compelling that neither of them had named. "And when the full moon rises?" Malcolm asked. "When you change?" A shadow crossed Alaric's face. "That complicates things." Of course it did. As Alpha King, Alaric's transformation was both literal and symbolic, a display of power meant to inspire his pack, to remind them why he led. He would run with his wolves, hunt with them, strengthen the bonds of pack through shared ritual, leaving Malcolm alone, vulnerable. "Unless," he said slowly, his gaze dropping to the silver pendant at Malcolm's throat, "you were to join us." Malcolm's blood turned to ice. "What?" "Not as you are now," Alaric clarified, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "but as what you truly are, Malcolm, what you've been hiding all along." The world seemed to tilt beneath Malcolm's feet. Alaric knew, or suspected strongly enough, that it amounted to the same thing. 10 years of careful deception unraveled by a week of intense scrutiny. "I don't know what you mean," Malcolm whispered, the denial automatic, instinctive. Alaric stepped closer, so near that Malcolm could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Don't you? 10 years you've lived among wolves without aging as a human should. 10 years of nightmares about people with names from the old bloodlines. 10 years wearing a silver crescent moon, the ancient symbol of those who walk between worlds." His hand moved to cup Malcolm's face, gentle but insistent. "You're not human. Not entirely. You're something far rarer, far more precious." His eyes, burning amber in the torchlight, held Malcolm's. "You're half wolf, half human, a hybrid." The truth hung in the air between them. The secret Malcolm had guarded with his life, the reality he had denied even to himself. "My father was Thorn Lyle," Malcolm admitted, his voice barely audible. "He was a wolf. My mother was human. I never knew how they met, how they managed to be together in a world that forbade such unions. They rarely spoke of it." Alaric's thumb traced along Malcolm's cheekbone. "The old bloodlines," he murmured. "The Lyalls were powerful, respected. They disappeared during the early days of the Great War." "Not disappeared. Hunted," Malcolm corrected bitterly. "By wolves who considered mixed blood an abomination. By humans who feared what they couldn't understand. By vampires who coveted our immunity to silver and daylight." "And yet here you are," Alaric said softly, "hiding in plain sight, in the heart of a wolf kingdom." "The safest place to hide is often the most dangerous," Malcolm replied. "No one expects a rabbit to make its den in a wolf's territory." A smile touched Alaric's lips. "But you're not a rabbit, are you?" Malcolm met his gaze. "No, I'm neither wolf nor human, but something between, never fully accepted by either. My father taught me to control the change from an early age, to suppress it entirely if necessary. It's why I can touch silver without burning, why I age more slowly than humans, why my scent is unusual. It's why I was drawn to you from the beginning," Alaric said, "even before I consciously recognized what you were." His hand dropped from Malcolm's face, but he didn't move away. "Tomorrow night, when the moon rises, you could choose to stop hiding, to stand with us, with me, as what you truly are." His forehead pressed against Malcolm's, breath warm against his lips. "You could finally be free, Malcolm. Free." The word shimmered with promise and terror in equal measure. Freedom to be what he was, to stop living in shadows and fear. But freedom also meant vulnerability, exposure to those who had hunted his kind to near extinction during the Great War. "I can't," he whispered, even as everything within him ached to say yes. "If the pack knew what I am—" "They would follow their alpha's lead," Alaric interrupted, "and I would kill anyone who threatened you." The fierce protectiveness in his voice sent a shudder through Malcolm. "But there's more, isn't there? Something you're still hiding." Malcolm closed his eyes. "My father," he admitted. "He wasn't just any wolf. He was A commotion in the hallway outside interrupted him. The doors to the throne room burst open, and Thor strode in, his face grim. 2 guards followed, dragging between them a struggling female wolf Malcolm recognized as one of the kitchen staff. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty," Thor said, "but we caught this one trying to enter the royal armory. She had this." He held up a silver dagger, its blade gleaming wickedly in the torchlight. The female wolf snarled, still struggling against the guard's hold. "Release me! I've done nothing wrong!" Alaric straightened, his posture shifting instantly from the intimate closeness he had shared with Malcolm to the rigid authority of the Alpha King. "Maria," he said, his voice cold, "you were in the kitchens the day Councillor Damon was killed. Explain yourself." She spat on the floor. "I owe you no explanations, false king. Your time ends soon." Malcolm tensed. "She's not working alone. This could be a distraction." "Thor," Alaric commanded, "double the guard on all royal chambers, particularly the ceremonial room." A look of triumph flashed across Maria's face, so brief Malcolm would have missed it had he not been watching closely. "Wait," he said. "It's too easy. She wanted to be caught." Alaric's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "She's a kitchen worker, not a trained spy or assassin," Malcolm explained rapidly. Yet she attempted to enter the most heavily guarded area in the castle, carrying a silver blade that would immediately mark her as suspicious. Why? To draw attention, Thor realized. To pull guards from somewhere else. "Where?" Alaric demanded, his gaze locking with Maria's. She smiled, a cold, satisfied smile that sent chills down Malcolm's spine. "The southern quarters," Malcolm said suddenly. "We're focused on protecting the ceremonial items, the council members, but what if the target is Cain himself?" "Why would the southern packs target their own alpha?" Thor objected. "Not the southern packs," Malcolm said, the pieces falling into place. "Someone who wants to frame the North for an assassination, to start a war." Alaric's face hardened. "The vampires. Dividing wolf territories has always been their strategy." He turned to Thor. "Take a full complement to the southern quarters. Now." As Thor rushed out, barking orders, Alaric looked at Maria with cold fury. "Who is your master, wolf? Who turned you against your own kind?" She laughed, a hollow, mocking sound. My kind died generations ago, when wolves like you hunted down the mixed bloods, the ones who dared to love beyond pack lines." Malcolm stiffened. "You're a hybrid," he breathed. "Like me." Her eyes widened in shock, then narrowed with calculation as she studied him. "So that's why he keeps you close, the mighty Alpha King with his own pet half-breed." "Enough," Alaric growled. "Take her to the secure cells. Triple guard. No one speaks to her without my direct authorization." As the guards dragged her away, Malcolm turned to Alaric. "She's a diversion," he said urgently. "But not for an attack on Cain, for something else." "What?" Alaric demanded. "I don't know, but we need to—" The entire castle shuddered suddenly, the floor beneath them trembling. A distant boom echoed through the corridors, followed by shouts and the acrid smell of smoke. "The Eastern Tower," Alaric realized, "where we keep the ancient records, the lineage books." They ran through the corridors, guards falling in around them, the smell of smoke growing stronger with each turn. When they reached the eastern wing, chaos reigned. Wolves ran with buckets of water, battling flames that leapt from the doorway of the tower's base. Through the haze, Malcolm spotted Elena directing the firefighting efforts, her face streaked with soot. "What happened?" Alaric demanded, reaching her side. "An explosion," she said, coughing. "Black powder from the smell. We've contained the fire to the tower itself, but the damage—" "The records?" Alaric asked, his voice tight. Elena shook her head grimly. "Most are lost, including the ancient bloodline records, the ones that trace the royal lines back to the first packs." Malcolm felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. The bloodline records, proof of legitimacy, of right to rule. Without them, Alaric's claim to the throne could be questioned, especially by traditionalists who already resented a northern wolf leading all the territories. "This was the real target all along," he said quietly to Alaric. "Not the murders, not the silver crown. Those were just steps leading to this. Someone is systematically destroying the symbols of your legitimate rule. Alaric's face was grim as he surveyed the burning tower, and with the Alliance gathering approaching, the timing couldn't be worse. "Your Majesty!" A young guard ran up, breathless. "Alpha Kane requests your presence immediately. There's been an attempt on his life." Malcolm and Alaric exchanged a glance. "As I said," Malcolm murmured, "a diversion within a diversion." They found Kane in his quarters, surrounded by his personal guards. A body lay on the floor, covered by a cloak. Blood seeped from beneath it, staining the ornate carpet. "My personal guard," Kane said without preamble as they entered. "Loyal to me for 15 years. Tonight he tried to slit my throat while I slept." "You're unharmed?" Alaric asked, his voice neutral. "I sleep lightly," Kane replied with a grim smile. He was not as quick as he thought. He gestured to the covered body. "What interests me is this." He pulled back the cloak to reveal the dead guard's face. Malcolm stifled a gasp. Around the man's neck hung a pendant identical to his own, a silver crescent moon with a small star. "Your man wears the same symbol as your advisor," Kane observed, his eyes flicking to Malcolm's throat. "Perhaps you can explain the connection?" Alaric's face remained impassive. "I can assure you there is no connection between Malcolm and this assassin." "No?" Kane's voice was dangerously soft. "Then explain how a southern wolf comes to wear the mark of the Lyall bloodline, the same mark your human wears so openly." Alaric tensed, almost imperceptibly. "The Lyalls were destroyed in the Great War." "Were they?" Kane's gaze shifted to Malcolm, assessing, calculating. "Or did some survive? Hiding, perhaps, in plain sight? Blood calls to blood, they say. Perhaps your human isn't what he appears." "These are serious implications, Alpha Kane," Alaric said, his voice cold. "Choose your next words carefully." Kane smiled, a predator's smile. "I merely observe what is before me. A castle in chaos, ancient records destroyed. A southern wolf wearing a Lyall pendant attempts to kill me. And at your right hand stands a man who is neither fully human nor wolf, but wears the same symbol." Malcolm felt the blood drain from his face. Kane knew. Somehow he had recognized what Malcolm was from the beginning. "The Alliance will want answers, Alaric," Kane continued. "About the murders, about the missing crown, about the burning tower, and most of all," his eyes locked on Malcolm, "about why you harbor a half-breed of royal blood without declaring him to the Pax." Alaric's hand moved to rest on Malcolm's shoulder, a clear gesture of protection and alliance. "You will have your answers tomorrow, Alpha Kane, all of them. For now, I suggest you rest. The full moon rises tomorrow night, and it promises to be eventful." As they left Kane's quarters, Malcolm felt the weight of exposure settling over him like a shroud. "He knows," he whispered once they were alone in the corridor. "How could he possibly know?" "Because he's been hunting your kind," Alaric replied grimly. "The question is why, and why now?" They walked in tense silence back to Alaric's chambers. Once inside, with guards posted at the door, Alaric turned to Malcolm. "There's something you need to know," he said, his voice heavy. "Something I should have told you earlier, about your father." Malcolm's heart stuttered. "What about him?" "Thorn Lyall didn't just disappear during the Great War," Alaric said quietly. "He was my father's closest ally. His death, or supposed death, is what turned the tide of the war. He was betrayed by someone within the pack, someone who feared his influence, his progressive ideas about humans and wolves coexisting." Malcolm stared at him, a cold dread spreading through his chest. "Who?" "My uncle. The same uncle I killed to claim the throne." The revelation hit Malcolm like a physical blow. "Your uncle betrayed my father? And you knew this when you granted me sanctuary 10 years ago?" "I suspected," Alaric admitted. "Your name, your pendant, your unusual qualities, they all suggested a connection to the Lyalls, but I couldn't be certain until now." "Why didn't you tell me?" Malcolm demanded, anger flaring. "For the same reason you didn't tell me what you are," Alaric countered. "Protection. If anyone knew a Lyall heir had survived, you would have been hunted mercilessly. My uncle had many allies, even after his death. Some still serve in my court. Like Elena, Malcolm realized suddenly. She's too interested in me, too knowledgeable about hybrids. Alaric nodded grimly. I've had my suspicions about her for some time, but without proof. The explosion tonight, Malcolm said. She was there immediately, directing the response. Too quickly, perhaps. And now the bloodline records are destroyed, Alaric added. Records that might have proven your lineage. Records that would have shown your father was the rightful alpha of all territories before his betrayal. Malcolm's head snapped up. What? The Lyalls were the original ruling line of all wolf territories, Alaric explained. When your father disappeared and was presumed dead, leadership fractured, north and south divided. My uncle claimed the northern throne through conquest, and I claimed it from him the same way. He moved closer to Malcolm, his eyes intense. But a direct Lyall heir would have a stronger claim than either of us. By blood right, by ancient pack law, you are the rightful alpha of all territories, Malcolm. That's impossible, Malcolm whispered. I'm a half-breed. No pure-blood wolf would ever accept me as alpha. They might, Alaric said, if you proved yourself during tomorrow's full moon. If you stood beside me, transformed, and showed them your true nature. The timing of these attacks, the destruction of the records, it can't be coincidence. Someone knows what you are and fears your potential claim. I don't want the throne, Malcolm protested. I never have. What you want may not matter, Alaric said softly. The question is, what are you willing to do to save the packs from those who would destroy them? Because whoever is behind these attacks wants more than just to undermine my rule. They want war between North and South, division, weakness. The perfect opportunity for the vampires to strike, Malcolm finished, to finish what they started in the Great War. Alaric nodded gravely. Tomorrow night, when the moon rises, you have a choice to make, Malcolm Thorne Lyall. Hide as you have for 10 years, or stand and claim your birthright. The fate of all wolves may depend on your decision. As moonlight spilled through the windows, casting long shadows across the chamber, Malcolm felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. 10 years of running, of hiding, of denying his true nature had led to this moment. Tomorrow, beneath the full moon's light, he would either remain in the shadows or step into the legacy his father had left him. And in doing so, he might save the packs or destroy them. Dawn broke gray and somber over the northern territories. Malcolm stood at the window in Alaric's chambers, watching as weak sunlight struggled to penetrate the heavy clouds that had rolled in overnight. A fitting sky for the day that would decide his fate, and perhaps the fate of all wolf-kind. He had barely slept. The revelations of the previous day had left him reeling. His father, not just any wolf, but Thorne Lyall, the rightful alpha of all territories. The knowledge settled uncomfortably on his shoulders, a weight he had never asked to bear. Behind him, Alaric slept, his powerful frame sprawled across the massive bed. They had talked long into the night, planning, strategizing, sharing secrets long held close. In the quiet darkness, it had been easier for Malcolm to speak of his past, of the village where he had grown up hidden among humans, of his father's careful lessons in controlling the change, of the night the vampires came and everything burned. He turned from the window, his gaze falling on Alaric. The Alpha King looked younger in sleep, the lines of authority smoothed from his face. For 10 years, Malcolm had feared this man, or at least what he represented. Now, in the space of a few days, everything had changed. Trust had bloomed between them, fragile but growing stronger with each shared confidence. And something else had bloomed too, something neither of them had dared to name. Alaric stirred, amber eyes opening to fix immediately on Malcolm. "You're thinking too loudly," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. Malcolm smiled faintly. "I didn't realize thoughts had a volume." "They do when they're as troubled as yours." Alaric sat up, the blankets pooling at his waist, revealing the muscular torso marked with the scars of countless battles. "Second thoughts?" "Second, third, fourth," Malcolm admitted. "I've spent my entire life hiding what I am. The idea of revealing myself, of claiming a birthright I never knew existed." He shook his head. "It seems like madness." Alaric rose from the bed, unself-conscious in his nakedness as he moved to stand before Malcolm. "And yet, you're still here. You haven't run." "Where would I go?" Malcolm asked softly. "The vampires still hunt my kind. The humans fear us. And after last night, it's clear there are wolves who would see me dead rather than recognize my claim." "Not all wolves," Alaric said, his hand rising to rest against Malcolm's cheek. "Some of us would stand with you." The touch was warm, grounding. Malcolm leaned into it slightly before he could stop himself. "Why? You said it yourself. By ancient pack law, I have a stronger claim to the throne than you do. Why would you help me assert that claim?" Alaric's gaze was steady, unflinching. "Because the throne was never my ambition. Protection of the pack is. If you are the better protector, I would gladly step aside." "I don't know how to be an alpha," Malcolm protested. "I've spent my life avoiding power, avoiding notice." "You've spent your life observing, learning, surviving against impossible odds." Alaric's thumb traced Malcolm's cheekbone. "Those are the qualities of a true leader." A knock at the door interrupted them. Alaric stepped back, reaching for a robe. "Enter," he called. Thor appeared, his expression grave. "Your Majesty, we found Elena." "Where?" Alaric demanded, instantly alert. "In the library archives. Dead." Thor's voice was flat. Her throat was cut, with silver. Malcolm felt a chill. "When?" "During the night, after the fire was contained." Thor's gaze shifted between them. "There's more. We found this clutched in her hand." He held out a scrap of fabric, blue, with silver embroidery, identical to the tunic Malcolm had worn the previous day. "Someone is trying very hard to frame me," Malcolm said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Or to send a message," Alaric countered, "that they can reach anyone, even those closest to us." "There's something else," Thor added hesitantly. "A message, written in her blood on the archive floor. It said, 'The false king falls when the true blood rises.'" Alaric's face hardened. "They know about Malcolm. And they're using my existence to undermine you," Malcolm concluded, "making it seem as though I'm behind the attacks, that I'm challenging your rule. The question remains, who?" Thor looked troubled. "If Elena was working with them, why kill her?" "Because she knew too much," Alaric said grimly. "Or because she had served her purpose." "Or because she wasn't actually involved," Malcolm suggested. "Maybe she discovered something in the archives after the fire, something the killer didn't want found." Thor nodded slowly. "I'll have my best trackers examine the scene. Perhaps they can pick up a scent the guards missed." "Do it discreetly," Alaric ordered. "I want no word of this reaching our southern guests until we know more." After Thor departed, Alaric turned back to Malcolm. "This changes our plans. If our enemies know what you are, revealing yourself tonight becomes even more dangerous." "Or more necessary," Malcolm countered. "They're already using me to destabilize your rule. Hiding won't change that. At least if I stand openly at your side, the pack will see the truth, that we are allies, not rivals." Alaric studied him thoughtfully. "You've changed," he observed. "The man who stood trembling before my throne would never have suggested such a bold move." Malcolm smiled wryly. That man was clinging to a lie, a comfortable lie, but a lie nonetheless. A slow smile spread across Alaric's face, transforming his stern features. "Then we proceed as planned, but we triple the guards and trust no one outside this room." The day passed in tense preparation. Malcolm spent hours with Alaric, reviewing ancient texts on hybrid transformations, relearning what he had suppressed for so long. His father had taught him to control the change from an early age, to embrace it when safe, to suppress it entirely when necessary. But it had been 10 years since Malcolm had allowed his dual nature free rein. The prospect was both terrifying and exhilarating. "Your transformation will be different from ours," Alaric explained as they studied a yellowed manuscript he had saved from the fire. Purebloods are compelled by the moon, driven to change whether they will it or not. But hybrids can choose. It's why you're so valuable, why the vampires hunted your kind nearly to extinction during the Great War. Because we can think like humans even in wolf form, Malcolm said. We maintain our reason, our humanity. Alaric nodded. It makes you dangerous, unpredictable, neither fully human nor fully wolf, but something more than either. My father said it was a gift and a curse, Malcolm recalled softly. The gift of choice, the curse of belonging nowhere. Perhaps it's time to change that, Alaric said, his voice gentle. To create a place where hybrids can belong, where all can belong, regardless of blood. The idea was revolutionary. For centuries, the wolf packs had maintained rigid hierarchies based on bloodlines and power. Humans were tolerated, but marginalized. Hybrids were hunted to near extinction. What Alaric suggested was nothing short of a complete restructuring of their society. Is that why your uncle betrayed my father? Malcolm asked. Because he shared these views? Thorne Lyle was a visionary, Alaric confirmed. He believed wolves, humans, and those of mixed blood could coexist, even thrive together. My uncle represented the old guard, tradition, separation, purity above all else. And where do you stand? Malcolm asked, though he thought he already knew the answer. Alaric's gaze was steady. With Thorne Lyle, with you. The simple declaration stirred something deep in Malcolm's chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire crackling in the hearth and everything to do with the man before him. As afternoon faded toward evening, Malcolm found himself thinking of his father. Thorne Lyle had been a powerful figure in Malcolm's childhood, strong, principled, loving, but stern. He had taught Malcolm to hunt, to track, to fight, but also to value reason over instinct, compassion over power. Your dual nature is your strength, Thorne had told him countless times. Never let anyone convince you it's a weakness. For 10 years, Malcolm had ignored that advice, burying his wolf nature so deeply he had almost forgotten it existed. Tonight, beneath the full moon, he would reclaim that part of himself. The question remained, could he control it after so long? A knock interrupted his thoughts. Thor entered, his expression carefully neutral. The Southern delegation requests a meeting before moonrise, he announced. Alpha Cain insists on speaking with both of you. Alaric and Malcolm exchanged a glance. Where? Alaric asked. The upper courtyard. Open sky, neutral ground. Thor's tone suggested he considered the request reasonable, if inconvenient. Tell him we will meet him an hour before moonrise, Alaric decided. No more than 3 wolves each side. After Thor departed, Malcolm turned to Alaric. Is this wise? It could be a trap. Almost certainly, Alaric agreed. But refusing would make us appear weak, fearful. Besides, the upper courtyard has clear sightlines. My archers can cover every approach. And if they attack anyway? Alaric's smile was cold. Then they'll discover why the North has never been conquered. As dusk approached, Malcolm dressed in the clothes Alaric had provided, sturdy trousers and boots that would accommodate his transformation, a loose shirt that would not bind. Around his neck, his father's pendant gleamed in the fading light. Whatever happened tonight, he would face it wearing the symbol of his lineage. Are you ready? Alaric asked, appearing at the doorway in similar attire. Malcolm took a deep breath. As I'll ever be. They walked together through the castle, guards forming a protective cordon around them. Word of Elena's death had spread, though the details remained confidential. Wolves bowed as they passed, their expressions a mixture of respect, curiosity, and in some cases, barely concealed hostility. The upper courtyard was an ancient space, open to the sky, enclosed by high stone walls. In times past, it had been used for duels, for judgments, for ceremonies too sacred to be held indoors. Tonight, with clouds racing across the darkening sky and the scent of rain heavy in the air, it felt like a place balanced between worlds. Alpha Cain waited in the center of the courtyard, flanked by 2 of his warriors. His posture was relaxed, confident, but his eyes were sharp as they tracked Alaric and Malcolm's approach. "Alpha King," he greeted formally. "And Malcolm Thorne, or should I say, Malcolm Lyle." Malcolm felt Alaric tense beside him, but kept his own expression neutral. "You requested this meeting, Alpha Kane. State your purpose." Kane's eyebrows rose at Malcolm's directness. "No denial, then? Interesting." He paced a slow circle around them, assessing. "My purpose is simple. I wish to avoid bloodshed." "As do I," Alaric replied coolly, "which is why your implied threats against a member of my household are concerning." "Your household?" Kane laughed softly. "Let's not pretend, Alaric. We both know what he is, what his existence means for both our territories." "And what exactly is that?" Malcolm asked, meeting Kane's gaze directly. "Chaos, war, the end of everything we've built since the Great War." Kane stopped his pacing to face Malcolm squarely. "Unless you're willing to be reasonable." "Explain," Alaric demanded. "It's quite simple. The hybrid renounces any claim to leadership publicly before all gathered alphas. He acknowledges your rule in the north, mine in the south. In return, he lives, protected, privileged, but powerless." "And if I refuse?" Malcolm asked quietly. Kane's smile was thin. "Then I cannot guarantee what might happen when the Alliance discovers a Lyell heir has returned. Some might welcome you. Others, well, there are those who remember the old bloodlines too well, who fear what they represent." "Is that a threat?" Alaric's voice had dropped to a dangerous growl. "A reality," Kane corrected. "One I'd prefer to avoid. The Southern Pacts have no quarrel with the North, not if the North stays north and leaves us to our traditions." Malcolm studied Kane carefully. There was something off about the Southern Alpha's demeanor, a tension beneath the practiced ease, a flicker in his eyes that suggested he wasn't being entirely forthcoming. "You're afraid," Malcolm realized suddenly. "But not of me. Of something else." Kane's expression hardened. "Careful, hybrid. You know nothing of my concerns." "I think I do," Malcolm pressed. "You're not here on your own behalf. Someone else sent you." "Sent. Someone who holds power over you." A muscle twitched in Kane's jaw, the barest tell, but enough to confirm Malcolm's suspicion. "The vampires," he said softly. "They've reached into the Southern Pacts, haven't they? How long have they controlled you, Alpha Kane?" For a moment, raw fury flashed across Kane's face. Then, with visible effort, he composed himself. "You know nothing of the complexities of leadership, half-breed. Sometimes alliances must be made, even with ancient enemies, to ensure survival." "Alliances?" Alaric's voice was incredulous. "With vampires? Have you forgotten what they did during the Great War? How they harvested entire human villages? How they hunted the hybrids to near extinction?" "I forget nothing," Kane snapped. "But times change. The world changed. After your father's death, Malcolm, the old alliances crumbled. The human governments that once stood with us fell. The wolf packs fractured. In that chaos, some of us had to make difficult choices." "You made a deal with the vampires," Malcolm said, disgust coloring his tone. "What did they promise you? Protection? Power?" "Survival," Kane hissed. "For my people. For the bloodlines that have remained pure for generations. The price was high but necessary." "And what was that price?" Alaric demanded. Kane's gaze shifted to Malcolm. "The extinction of the Lyell line. The assurance that no hybrid would ever unite the territories again." A cold weight settled in Malcolm's stomach. "That's why they attacked my village. They weren't just harvesting humans. They were hunting for me." "For any Lyell," Kane confirmed. "Your father was thought dead already. When rumors surfaced of a woman and child with Lyell connections hiding in a remote village, well, you gave them the location," Malcolm realized, horror and rage rising in equal measure. "You told them where to find us." "I gave them what they wanted, and in return, the Southern Pacts were spared the harvesting that decimated human settlements. A fair exchange." "Fair?" Malcolm's voice shook with barely contained fury. "My mother died that night. Every person I had known since childhood died." "Regrettable," Kane said, without a trace of actual regret, "but necessary." "And Elena?" Alaric interjected. The murders in my court, the stolen crown, the destroyed archives, all part of your necessary betrayal?" Kane's expression revealed genuine confusion. "I know nothing of your internal problems, Alaric. My arrangements with the Eastern Territories concern only the South." "You expect us to believe that?" Thor growled, speaking for the first time. "Believe what you will," Kane replied with a shrug. "But consider this. Why would I draw attention to myself by murdering your council members when my only goal was to keep the Lyell heir from claiming his birthright? The vampires want the wolf packs divided, not at each other's throats." Malcolm exchanged a glance with Alaric. As much as he hated to admit it, Kane's words held a certain logic. "If not you, then who?" Alaric demanded. "That is your mystery to solve," Kane said. "Mine is simpler. What will you do, Malcolm Lyell? Will you renounce your claim and preserve the peace, such as it is? Or will you risk war between all territories for a throne you never sought?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with centuries of history, with blood and betrayal and the fates of thousands. "I need time to consider," Malcolm said finally. "You have until the moon reaches its zenith," Kane replied. "No longer." With a curt nod to Alaric, he turned and strode away, his guards following close behind. When they had gone, Thor moved closer. "You believe him? About not being involved in the murders?" "Partially," Alaric said, his expression troubled. "His shock at Elena's death seemed genuine, but he's hiding something still." "The question is what?" Malcolm added, "and how it connects to everything else that's happened." They made their way back to Alaric's chambers in tense silence, each lost in thought. The revelation of Kane's deal with the vampires had shifted the landscape of their understanding, but key pieces of the puzzle remained missing. "If Kane and the vampires want me to renounce my claim, to keep the territories divided," Malcolm reasoned once they were alone, "then they aren't behind the murders or the attacks on your symbols of authority. Those actions have only brought us closer together, strengthened our alliance." "Which suggests a third party," Alaric concluded, "someone who wants neither the status quo nor a peaceful transition of power." "Someone who wants war," Malcolm said grimly, "open conflict between North and South that would weaken both sides. Benefiting the vampires ultimately," Alaric added, "but not through Kane's careful balance of power, through chaos." A knock at the door interrupted their theorizing. One of Alaric's personal guards entered, his expression urgent. "Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion, but we've found something, in Elena's quarters." "What?" Alaric demanded. "Letters, Your Majesty, many letters, from the East." "The vampires," Malcolm breathed. "No, Your Majesty, from beyond the Eastern Territories, from the sea." Alaric and Malcolm exchanged startled glances. "The sea?" Alaric repeated. "There's nothing beyond the Eastern Territories except the endless ocean." "So we've always believed," the guard agreed. "But these letters speak of lands across the water, of wolf packs there, old bloodlines who fled during the Great War, and of their plans to return." "Bring these letters to me," Alaric commanded, "immediately." When the guard had gone, Malcolm turned to Alaric. "Old bloodlines from across the sea. Could it be true?" "It would explain much," Alaric said thoughtfully. "The attacks on symbols of my authority, the attempts to frame you. If there are other claimants to the throne, then my existence is as much a threat to them as it is to you," Malcolm realized. "More so if my bloodline truly gives me the stronger claim." "And Elena was their agent," Alaric continued, "working not for Kane or the vampires, but for these overseas wolves." "Until she outlived her usefulness," Malcolm added grimly, "or discovered something they couldn't allow to be revealed." The guard returned quickly, bearing a leather pouch filled with parchments. Alaric spread them on the table, and together they began to read. The letters were written in an archaic form of the wolf tongue, but clear enough to understand. "They call themselves the Pure Packs," Malcolm said, scanning one yellowed page. "Descendants of the oldest bloodlines who fled across the ocean during the darkest days of the Great War. Led by a blackthorn," Alaric added, reading from another letter, "an ancient line thought extinct for generations. They've been watching the territories for years," Malcolm continued, moving to another document. waiting for the right moment to return and reclaim what they consider their birthright. The leadership of all wolf packs, Alaric concluded. They see both the northern and southern leaders as usurpers, and they would view a Lyall heir with mixed blood as an abomination. Elena was their spy, Malcolm said, finding confirmation in yet another letter, reporting on your rule, on the stability of the territories. And when she reported your arrival 10 years ago, Alaric added grimly, they began planning in earnest. The murders, the theft, the fire, all designed to destabilize my rule while turning suspicion toward you. Creating the perfect storm of mistrust just as they prepared to return, Malcolm finished. A final letter, dated just weeks earlier, confirmed their worst fears. The Pure Packs planned to arrive during the Alliance gathering, when all territorial leaders would be assembled. They would reveal themselves, claim their ancient rights, and execute any who opposed them, starting with the abomination of Lyall blood and the usurper who sheltered him. They're already here, Malcolm realized with sudden certainty. The attacks are too coordinated, too immediate. They have agents in the castle beyond Elena. The question is who, Alaric said, his expression grim. And how many? Outside, clouds parted momentarily, allowing the light of the rising full moon to spill through the windows. Malcolm felt its pull immediately, a stirring in his blood that he had suppressed for too long. We're out of time, he said, meeting Alaric's gaze. The moon rises. We must decide. Alaric moved to stand before him, close enough that Malcolm could feel the heat radiating from his body. What your father began, what the Pure Packs feared, what I have worked toward in my own way, it all comes to this moment. Unity, strength through alliance rather than conquest. His hands came up to frame Malcolm's face. I don't care about thrones or ancient claims. I care about our people, all of them. Wolves, humans, hybrids. And I care about you, Malcolm Lyall, more than I should, perhaps. The admission hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Malcolm felt something shift within him, a certainty crystallizing where doubt had lived for so long. I've spent my life running from what I am, he said softly, from responsibility, from connection, from power. But tonight, Alaric prompted, his amber eyes intent. Tonight I stop running. Malcolm's voice grew stronger. Tonight I stand with you as what I truly am, not to claim a throne, but to honor my father's vision, to protect our people from those who would divide us further. Alaric's smile was fierce, triumphant. Then let us face them together, man and wolf, alpha and heir. Whatever comes, we face it united. As the moon climbed higher in the night sky, Malcolm felt the change stirring beneath his skin, not with the painful compulsion the purebloods experienced, but with a welcome familiarity, like greeting an old friend. For the first time in 10 years, he didn't fight it. He embraced it. And as Alaric's lips met his in a kiss that tasted of promise and belonging, Malcolm knew with bone-deep certainty that he had found his pack at last. Whatever dangers the night might bring, he would face them as his true self, neither wolf nor human, but both, and all the stronger for it. The moon hung full and heavy in the night sky, casting silver light across the castle grounds. Malcolm stood in the central courtyard, feeling the ancient pull in his blood, stronger than it had been in a decade. Around him, wolves gathered, northern pack members loyal to Alaric, all watching with a mixture of curiosity and wariness as their alpha king stood beside the man they had known only as a kitchen servant. The time has come, Alaric announced, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. Tonight, beneath the full moon, truths will be revealed and choices made that will shape the future of all wolf kind. Malcolm felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. News had spread quickly through the castle, rumors of his heritage, whispers of ancient bloodlines and forgotten claims. Some looked at him with hope, others with suspicion, still others with outright hostility. Alaric continued, his voice strong and clear in the night air. For too long, our territories have been divided. North against south, wolf against wolf. While our true enemies gather at our borders, we fight amongst ourselves." He turned to Malcolm, extending his hand. "Tonight, we begin to change that." Malcolm stepped forward, taking Alaric's offered hand. The connection between them was electric, charged with purpose and shared resolve. "I present to you Malcolm Thorne Lyell," Alaric announced, "son of Thorne Lyell, heir to the oldest bloodline of our kind." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The name Lyell still carried weight, even after generations of supposed extinction. For 10 years he has lived among us, watching, learning, serving. Many of you knew him as the quiet man in the kitchens. Tonight, you will know him as he truly is. From the edge of the courtyard, a voice called out, sharp with challenge, "Let him prove his bloodline, then!" Victor pushed through the crowd, his scarred face twisted with suspicion. The Lyells were known for their control of the change. Let him demonstrate this legendary power. The gathering fell silent, all eyes turning to Malcolm. This was the moment of truth. The moment he would either reclaim his heritage or fail before the entire pack. He looked to Alaric, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Support and confidence flowed between them, strengthening Malcolm's resolve. "I accept the challenge," Malcolm said, his voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in his stomach. He stepped into the center of the courtyard, alone in a circle of watchful wolves. The silver pendant gleamed against his chest as he reached for it, drawing strength from the symbol of his lineage. Malcolm closed his eyes, feeling the moonlight on his skin. For 10 years he had fought against this moment, suppressing his true nature, denying the wolf that lived within him. Now he embraced it. The change came not with the painful contortions the purebloods experienced, but with a fluid grace, like water flowing into its natural course after being dammed for too long. His senses heightened first, the sense of the gathered wolves becoming more distinct, the sounds of their breathing and heartbeats clearer. Then came the physical transformation, subtle compared to a pureblood's complete metamorphosis, but unmistakable. His body remained largely human, but altered, stronger, faster, more agile. His eyes, when he opened them, glowed a luminous silver blue, reflecting the moonlight. His nails lengthened into claws, his teeth sharpened to points. Dark fur emerged along his forearms and the back of his neck, sleek and lustrous in the moonlight. But most importantly, he remained fully conscious, fully in control. Where purebloods lost themselves to instinct during the change, Malcolm stood before them with clear eyes and focused mind, the perfect balance of man and wolf. A hush fell over the courtyard. Even Victor stared in stunned silence. Many of the younger wolves had never seen a hybrid transformation, had heard of them only in legends and cautionary tales. "This is the gift of the Lyell bloodline," Malcolm said, his voice deeper, resonant with power. "Not just strength or speed, but control. The ability to be both wolf and man, to take the best of both natures." Alaric stepped forward to stand beside him. "This is what our enemies fear. Not just Malcolm's claim to leadership, but what he represents, the potential for unity, for a new way forward." "What enemies?" Thor questioned, moving closer. "The southern packs?" "No," came a voice from the edge of the gathering. Elena, the older female council member who had been injured in the attack days before, made her way through the crowd, a bandage still wrapped around her head. "There are greater threats than territorial disputes among wolves." "Elena," Alaric acknowledged with surprise, "you should be resting." "There's no time for rest," she replied grimly. "Not with what I've discovered." Malcolm studied her with his enhanced senses. Something about her had changed since their last meeting. Her scent carried notes of fear, urgency, and something else, resolution. "After I was attacked," Elena continued, addressing the gathered wolves, "I returned to the archives, to the few documents that survived the fire. What I found there—" She paused, her eyes meeting Malcolm's. "The vampires have been manipulating us for decades, not just the South as we suspected, but the North as well." Alaric's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "The Eastern territories have grown stronger since the Great War," Elena said. not through direct conquest, but through subterfuge. They've worked to keep the wolf packs divided, playing us against each other while they expanded their influence. We've known the vampires wanted division, Thor said. That's hardly a revelation. What you don't know, Elena countered, is that they've allied with wolves, or rather, creatures who claim to be wolves, from across the ocean. Malcolm felt a chill. Across the ocean? Elena nodded. They call themselves the Pure Packs, led by the Blackthorn line. They believe they're the only true wolves, the ones who kept the bloodlines pure when others, like the Lyalls, embraced change and cooperation with humans. And the vampires work with them? Alaric asked incredulously. No alliance lasts forever between predators, Elena said. The vampires promised the Pure Pack's power in exchange for helping eliminate the hybrid bloodlines. But once the hybrids were gone, once the territories were weakened by internal strife, the vampires would turn on their allies, Malcolm finished, understanding dawning. The perfect opportunity to expand westward. Precisely, Elena said. That's why they killed council members loyal to you, Alaric. Why they stole the crown, burned the archives, not just to undermine your rule, but to ensure that when the Pure Packs arrived, we would be too busy fighting among ourselves to present a united front. When? Alaric demanded. When do these Pure Packs arrive? Before Elena could answer, a commotion erupted at the edge of the courtyard. Guards shouted warnings as a group of wolves pushed through, led by Cain. What is the meaning of this? The Southern Alpha demanded, striding into the open space. Private pack ceremonies under the full moon, or conspiracy against our alliance? His gaze landed on Malcolm, widening slightly at the sight of his partially transformed state. So, the rumors are true. The half-breed has revealed himself. Choose your next words carefully, Cain, Alaric warned. Cain's eyes narrowed. I come with news, Alaric. News that concerns us all. He turned to address the gathered wolves. Ships have been sighted approaching our eastern shores. Ships bearing unfamiliar sigils and scents. Elena stepped forward, her expression grim. The Blackthorns. You know of them? Cain asked sharply. Better than you might imagine, she replied. How long have you been working with the vampires, Cain? The Southern Alpha's face betrayed nothing, but Malcolm detected a spike in his heartbeat, a subtle shift in his scent that spoke of fear. I made arrangements to ensure the survival of my people, Cain said carefully. The East grows stronger each year. They offered protection, security. At what price? Alaric demanded. Information, Cain admitted reluctantly. Movement of wolves between territories, names of those with mixed blood. And my father's name? Malcolm asked quietly. Did you give them that too? A flash of genuine regret crossed Cain's face. I didn't know about you specifically. I only reported rumors of a Lyall heir somewhere in the north. They were already hunting your kind long before I made my deal. And these ships? Thor pressed. Did your vampire allies mention them? No, Cain said, and Malcolm sensed truth in his words. This is new. The Eastern Lord assured me their expansion would be gradual, diplomatic. Elena laughed bitterly. And you believed them. Vampires never share power willingly, Cain. You've been played as much as any of us. These Pure Packs, Alaric said, turning to Elena. What do they want? What every invader wants, she replied. Power, territory, and the elimination of those they consider impure. Her gaze shifted to Malcolm, starting with the last Lyall heir. As if summoned by her words, 3 guards at the perimeter of the courtyard suddenly moved with unnatural speed, drawing weapons from beneath their cloaks. But Thor was faster, tackling one to the ground while northern wolves closed in on the others. Vampires! Thor roared, struggling with his captive, whose disguise was rapidly failing, revealing pale skin and elongated fangs. Eastern infiltrators! The courtyard exploded into action. Wolves transformed in flashes of pain and power, fur and fangs erupting as they lunged toward the revealed enemies. The vampires fought with desperate ferocity, their strength and speed nearly matching that of the transformed wolves. Malcolm moved instinctively to protect Alaric, his hybrid form allowing him to retain human reasoning while accessing wolf strength. Together they faced a vampire who had broken through the defensive line, his pale face contorted with hatred. "The Alliance dies tonight," the creature hissed, lunging at them with unnatural speed. "While you wolves slaughter each other over ancient grudges, we'll take what remains." Malcolm intercepted the attack, claws slashing across the vampire's chest. The wound should have been devastating, but the creature merely laughed, the injury closing almost instantly. "You cannot kill what is already dead, half-breed," it mocked. "Perhaps not," Malcolm agreed, then drove his silver pendant into the vampire's heart with all his strength. "But silver still burns." The vampire shrieked, black blood erupting from the wound as the silver seared through undead flesh. It collapsed, writhing in agony, until Alaric ended its suffering with a swift, merciful blow. Around the courtyard, the battle was ending. Thor had subdued his opponent, while the third vampire lay dead, torn apart by transformed wolves. But Malcolm knew this was just the beginning. "We need to prepare," he said urgently to Alaric. "If the ships are coming—" "More than ships," Elena interrupted, approaching with a bloodied arm that she cradled against her chest. "The attack tonight was a distraction. There are more vampires in the castle, disguised as guards or servants, and I believe they've already sent a false welcome party to greet the Blackthorns." "To ensure they join the conflict on the wrong side," Alaric realized. "Or to eliminate them before they can ally with us," Malcolm added. "The Blackthorns may be intolerant, but they're still wolves. They would never willingly serve vampires once they discovered their true intent." Kane approached slowly, his expression troubled. "If what you say is true, then I've endangered us all." "You've been manipulated," Malcolm said, surprising himself with the absence of bitterness in his voice. "We all have. The vampires played on our divisions, our fears." "Then perhaps it's time we stopped playing their game," Elena suggested, looking between Malcolm and the two alpha wolves. "North and south, pure blood and hybrid, we face a common enemy, one that has exploited our divisions for too long." Alaric nodded slowly, then extended his hand to Kane. "A true alliance. Not just a gathering of separate powers, but a united front against the Eastern Territories. Against the vampire threat." Kane hesitated, his gaze moving from Alaric to Malcolm, weighing options, calculating advantages. Finally, he clasped Alaric's offered hand. "A united front," he agreed. "For now." It wasn't full acceptance, wasn't the end of centuries of division and suspicion, but it was a beginning. "We need to warn the approaching ships," Malcolm said. "If they truly are the Pure Packs returning, they're sailing into a trap." "I'll send my fastest runners to the eastern shore," Kane offered, with proof of vampire treachery. "And we must secure the castle," Alaric added. "If 3 vampires infiltrated our guards, there may be others." As they discussed strategy, Malcolm felt Elena's eyes on him. He turned to find her studying him with an intensity that made him uneasy. "What is it?" he asked. "Your father would be proud," she said softly. "Thorn always believed unity was our strength. It's why the old guard feared him, and why the vampires orchestrated his disappearance." Malcolm stared at her. "You knew my father?" "I fought beside him," she replied simply. "Before your birth, before his supposed death. He was a visionary, a leader who saw beyond old hatreds and divisions." "Like Alaric," Malcolm observed. "Like you," Elena corrected. "You have his eyes, his way of seeing connections others miss." She glanced toward where Alaric stood conferring with his captains. "And you have something he never found." "What's that?" "An alpha who sees you as an equal, as a partner." Elena's gaze was knowing. "Don't waste that gift, Malcolm Lyle. Such connections are rare in any lifetime." Before Malcolm could respond, Alaric approached, his expression grave but determined. "We've found more vampire infiltrators," he reported. 8 in total, all carrying messages meant to provoke conflict between wolf factions. "And the ships?" Malcolm asked. "We'll make landfall by dawn," Kane answered, joining them. "We've combined our forces to secure the shore and reveal the vampire deception to the Blackthorns, should they truly be who they claim." "And if they're not?" Elena asked. "Then we face whatever comes together," Alaric said firmly. Malcolm felt a strange sense of completion. For the first time in his life, he wasn't hiding, wasn't running, wasn't denying his dual nature. He stood in the moonlight as his true self, both man and wolf, both leader and servant. "What now?" he asked Alaric quietly as the others dispersed to prepare for the coming conflict. Alaric studied him for a long moment. "By blood right, you have claim to leadership of all territories. The Lyell line supersedes both mine and Kane's." "I never wanted a throne," Malcolm said truthfully. "I wanted belonging, safety, purpose." "And now?" Malcolm considered the question carefully, feeling the weight of his heritage, of his father's legacy, of the future stretching before him. "Now I want what my father wanted. Unity, strength through alliance rather than conquest." He met Alaric's amber gaze directly. "But I don't need a crown to work toward that vision." Relief and something warmer flickered in Alaric's eyes. "What are you proposing?" "A council, not a king," Malcolm said, the idea forming as he spoke. "Leadership shared between territories, between bloodlines. No one pack or bloodline holding absolute power." "Radical," Alaric observed, but there was approval in his tone. "Necessary," Malcolm countered. "The old ways led us to division, to vulnerability. If we're to face the vampire threat, we need every advantage, including new perspectives, diverse strengths." Alaric studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "A council, then, with representatives from north and south, from pure bloodlines and mixed. With you and me as founding members," Malcolm added. "Together." The word hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond political alliance. Alaric's expression softened, his hand rising to touch Malcolm's face in a gesture both tender and possessive. "Together," he agreed softly, as it was meant to be. Around them, the castle hummed with preparation. Guards moved with renewed purpose, securing entrances, verifying identities, preparing for whatever the dawn might bring. The alliance gathering would proceed, not as the vampires had planned, with wolves at each other's throats, but with a united front against their common enemy. As the full moon began its descent toward the western horizon, Malcolm felt its power not as compulsion, but as possibility. The night was ending, but a new day approached, one that would test the fragile alliance they had forged, one that would determine the fate of all wolfkind. And for the first time in 10 years, Malcolm faced the coming dawn not with fear, but with hope.